Every country in the world is in debt. The United States sits on over $38 trillion of debt today, the highest in its history. The European Union carries roughly 14 trillion, Japan nearly 9 trillion. Even oil-rich nations, even export powerhouses like Germany and China are drowning in staggering debt loads. But here's the paradox. If everyone is in debt, who's the creditor? Debt isn't just a burden. Debt is the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every rise and fall is built on this invisible scaffolding, IOUs. And if you follow the creditor chain long enough, you arrive at an uncomfortable truth. The world isn't in debt to anyone in particular. The world is in debt to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we got here, to a point where the planet is crushed under over $315 trillion in total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the global economy, we need to go back to the very beginning. Long before credit cards, long before digital transfers, the idea of national debt wasn't born on Wall Street. It was born in war. In 1694, England was fighting France and running out of gold. The king turned to merchants for help. In return, he promised them a permanent stream of interest secured by future taxes. To manage this new arrangement, the Bank of England was founded. This was revolutionary. The state could now spend money it didn't yet have, and in return, lenders got something priceless, a promise from the government, a promise that could be bought, sold, and transferred. This was the birth of the government bond, the seed of the modern financial system. France copied it, the Dutch refined it, the newly independent United States embraced it to finance its revolution and expand westward. National debt was no longer a sign of failure, it was a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow was the ability to govern. Empires used to conquer land and extract gold. Now they issued bonds and collected interest. The battlefield had become the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the world's greatest export. America owes $38 trillion, Japan nearly $9 trillion, and global debt is increasing by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Everyone is a debtor. Every bank is a creditor. Every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pension funds, is both. So who's holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with the United States, because its debt isn't just national, it's global. Of that $38 trillion, roughly half is publicly held, meaning it's owned not by internal government agencies but by investors. About 2/3 of those investors are American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, is held by foreigners. The largest creditor is Japan with roughly $1 trillion, followed by China with $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say America owes China, that's partially true, but it's only about 2% of the total debt. Most of America's debt is owed to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys those bonds back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes pay the interest on the bonds. The interest flows into American retirement accounts. It's a circular mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly a reflection of the system. And this circularity isn't unique to America. It's global.
Japan lends to the U.S. through bonds. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. And developing nations lend back to advanced economies by parking their foreign reserves in Western bonds. It's a planetary game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Every country holds another's IOU. Every promise is secured by another promise. It's like a poker table where everyone borrows chips from the next player. The only rule keeping the game alive is that no one leaves the table. But there's a fourth layer, the markets themselves. Behind every government bond sits a web of hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions of dollars. They are the real arbiters of credit. They decide which countries borrow cheap and which pay high interest just to survive. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, economies are restructured overnight. Democracy decides who governs, markets decide who survives. And the biggest market maker in this system, the high priest of the modern age, is the central bank. Central banks don't just manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys a bond, it creates new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. Every dollar in circulation represents a debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every banknote, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. For decades, this loop held on confidence. As long as investors believed governments would pay the interest, even if they never paid the principal, the machine kept running. But what happens when confidence shakes? We've seen it before. In 2010, Greece's debt became unsustainable. Bondholders panicked, interest rates skyrocketed. The European Central Bank and the IMF intervened. But the price of the bailout was austerity. Tax hikes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For a generation, rescue was another word for sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, when foreign currency ran out to pay debts, fuel crises and political collapse followed. When the system breaks, the creditors become visible. The IMF, the rating agencies, the nameless bondholders, the actors who have every nation by the throat. But even after collapse, the same logic restarts. New debts replace the old. Debts are restructured. The machine resets on the same balance sheet with a new name. Because in the 21st century, debt wasn't designed to be paid. Debt was designed to be rolled over. Governments don't plan to close their debt. Not now, not ever. This isn't a conspiracy, it's policy. When individuals take out credit, they must pay back the principal, but governments treat debt like a subscription that never expires. They issue new bonds to pay off the old ones. It's called refinancing. The real product is the interest, the rent of stability. The global economy is now addicted to this rent, like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. America will never close its $38 trillion debt. It will roll it over perpetually. Japan has been rolling its debt for decades. Debt has exceeded 250% of GDP, but interest rates remain near zero. Investors aren't waiting for their money back. They're waiting for the deal to renew. Because government bonds are seen as the world's safest collateral. A U.S. Treasury bond isn't a liability, it's an asset. Pension funds hold them, banks use them as collateral, central banks treat them like cash. The system depends on governments never paying their debt. If they did, the global economy would collapse. If Washington fully closed its debt, the world's most trusted financial asset would vanish. The money supply would contract, deflation and collapse would follow. Paying off the debt would destroy the system. That's why governments don't reduce debt, they increase it rhythmically. Debt has become capitalism's heartbeat. It flows through every pension, every mortgage, every market. That's why balancing the budget talk is an illusion. The goal isn't to end the debt, it's to make it sustainable. Because when belief is lost, the numbers lose their meaning. Interest rates spike, the economy stops. That's the secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never to pay it back. The plan was to make the world believe it would be paid. It's a confidence loop, and as long as confidence lasts, the numbers can be stretched indefinitely. But confidence isn't distributed equally. Interest payments flow upward, from taxpayers, from workers, to institutions and investors. Debt isn't a transfer between countries, it's a transfer between classes. That's why as global debt rises, inequality rises too. The system rewards those who hold the debt, it punishes those who pay it.
If this sounds familiar, it's because it's the same story scaled up. Debtors and creditors are two faces of the same engine. The problem starts when the engine runs out of fuel. That's when the question, who's the creditor, stops being abstract and becomes personal. And at the top of this pyramid, there's no single culprit. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. All of them, and us. The modern financial system turned debt into money. Governments produce it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, citizens become dependent on it. The line between debtor and creditor has been erased. Debt used to mean bondage. Today, it means balance. But if the balance breaks, the illusion ends, and we remember what debt really is, a promise that can't be kept forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, feel free to share, like, and subscribe.